I want to share with you some information and kind of do a VRS or vocational rehabilitation services overview. I know that you guys are familiar to a certain degree with vocational rehabilitation services, which is the reason that you're becoming providers. We have the state covered as far as supported employment. I'm pleased to say that every county of the state is covered with a supported employment provider, and in some counties there is more than one provider, and so we do appreciate that. Vocational rehabilitation services certainly could not reach the many people that we reach without the assistance of our partners, and so we appreciate the partnership. Um, just to kind of walk you through just to walk you through the vocational rehabilitation services process, our counselors get referrals from many different entities, including family members. Consumers make direct referrals of themselves. Um, Schools, colleges, sometimes doctors' offices. We get referrals from various sources. And if a provider or if someone is interested in making a referral to our office, they can do so by the website. We have a great website, www.rehab.alabama.gov, or you could call the local VR office in your area to make the referral. So just kind of walk you through, once the referral is made, a vocational rehabilitation counselor will do what we call an intake and take an application on the consumer. And that application process is kind of like an interview where they're gathering information on the consumer, learning about their education, their employment. Someone is waiting to be in, so I'm going to admit someone real quick. So learn about their education, their employment, the things that they may be interested in, learning more about their disability. They're gathering records at this time, finding out what the functional limitations are, and things like that. And once the application is secured or taken, the consumer becomes an applicant with vocational rehabilitation services, and then the counselor receives all of the necessary medical records that are needed, or educational records, or things to verify or document that this consumer has a disability and in what area and what functional limitations. And then we move on to do our certificate of eligibility. And at that time, we're now saying that this consumer meets our definition of eligibility, and that is having a mental or physical disability that impedes or causes functional limitations and impediments to employment. And it has to be documented. And also, the individual has to require vocational rehabilitation services in order to prepare for, gain, and maintain employment. So that is our eligibility. And so, a lot for supported employment, the individual has to meet one more step for eligibility. They have to be eligible for our supported employment providers or our program, and by having a most significant disability. And basically that means they met all the eligibility requirements, but in addition to that, this person has not been able to work in competitive employment, or it's been intermitted or interrupted because of the individual's disability, and that pretty much classifies them as the most significantly disabled individual, and they must need more thorough or more intensive services for a longer period of time. So by the time an individual gets to you, those steps have all been taken. And then the counselor will go into writing what we call the individualized plan for employment. And basically, we have 4 plan types in vocational rehabilitation services. And the one that you will come in at would be our plan type called supported employment. We have an employment plan type, a self-employment plan type, a RAVE, which is retaining a valued employee plan type, and then we have the supported employment plan type. And as I said, that's the part where you guys will come in to assist the counselor in providing services. So on that individualized plan for employment, the counselor will document, or we will have established a vocational rehabilitation goal. And you have to put the services that would be the steps that would be taken in terms of services to help the consumer reach that goal, and as well as who the service providers are and criteria to evaluate progress. So those things will be taken by the time they get to you in terms of looking for employment. Now, a vocational rehabilitation counselor may want to provide the referral to you at what we call the application status or the eligibility status. And at that time, if they do, if the plan has not been written, they're looking for you to provide an assessment. And we're going to have Tim Green on later who will talk to us about assessments. Um, and then once the assessment is done, that'll give the counselor more information to write the vocational rehabilitation plan if it has not been written already. And so let me talk to you too about some of the services that may go on the vocational rehabilitation plan. Vocational counseling and guidance. Every consumer will get vocational counseling and guidance. That's something that we do beginning during the intake. And we will be talking to the consumer about labor market, about job tasks, yeah, different to making referral sources or sharing information about referral sources, just things to help the consumer get from point A to point B, meaning the ultimate goal would be to assist them in getting meaningful employment. So that's vocational counseling guidance. Everyone will receive that. Job placement assistance slash employment services, assistive technologies, where we have individuals who have those functional limitations that may need adaptive support in order to be successful on the job, or adaptive technology. We have rehab engineers on staff to assist with that. They can do many things. And we have educational services. We provide job training, vocational assessments, and many rehabilitation services that I won't even go over because there are so many and they're all individualized. We have consumers who have sensory impairments, and there are just a whole host of services that go along with that vocational rehabilitation services can offer. So all of our services are individualized and based on the needs of the consumers. So after the plan is written, the services are provided, the vocational goal is achieved, then the counselor will go and look at for closing the case, hopefully in a successful rehabilitation category. And we close the case typically at 90 days successful employment. However, as I mentioned earlier, a supported employment case will require more. So we're looking at 90 days of successful employment in addition to the time that you've taken as a supported employment provider, providing intensive job coach services and getting that consumer to the point of being stable on the job. So 90 days plus the time it takes for you to get the consumer hired, stable on the job. And then we start counting the 90 days for successful employment. And then vocational rehabilitation at that time will go on to close out the case successfully employed if the consumer is satisfied and all of the and vocational goal is met and all of the services have been provided that are required. And then that consumer will go into what we call long-term support, close with vocational rehab. You as the service provider, you're agreeing to continue to follow this individual for the life of the job, providing twice a month contact, one with the consumer, typically one with the employer, and just making sure the consumer knows that you're available, the employer knows you're available, going back in to provide assistance to that consumer and doing what is required to help that consumer maintain that successful employment for the life of the job. So that is our VRS overview. And do we have any questions about that? If you do, put them in the chat box. And before I move on, Donna, can you monitor the chat box for me, see if there are any questions about what I just covered, or if I need to elaborate on anything else before I go into covering our milestones overview?
Right now, there are no questions.
Perfect. All right, then. So thank you. So I will move on at this time to talk about our milestone services, and I'm going to try to pull up a different page for you right now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen just for a minute to pull up our milestone overview. bear with me. This is the age of Zoom. All right. So basically, we talked about what is required for a consumer to even get to you. They have to be considered a most significantly disabled individual. So in addition to meeting the VR eligibility requirement and needing a long-term support and all of that, the counselor will use an assessment tool. It's called the Flipper. That's the Functional Limitation Priority Assessment. And the individual has to score at least an 89 on that. So I just wanted to share that with you. That's not anything that you have to be concerned about or know. The vocational rehabilitation counselor will have done that work by the time the consumer even gets to you as a referral. So when the referral comes into you, hopefully they will have like a package, information, the personal information page with the information for you to know how to contact the consumer, name, address, all of that. Hopefully a little medical information about the consumer. And if the counselor has already done a plan for employment, then should receive a copy of that. And if the consumer came to you in the application status or the eligibility status, then you will not have a plan for employment. But once it's done and the counselor is asking you to proceed with those services for job placement assistance, then at that time you should have the plan for employment so that you can know how to implement or to assist in implementing the plan. The plan should have information like, of course, the vocational goal, how many hours we expect this individual to work a week at the minimum, and then who will be providing the long-term support, which would be your agency, more than likely if the referral is being sent to you. Let's see. If when they, I would encourage you not to proceed with a service, at least not with the assessment without receiving an authorization from the vocational rehabilitation office or from that counselor. I encourage you to develop a partnership with the counselor and the person who will be writing or doing your authorizations. It may be a liaison counselor, or in some of our offices, the counselors do their own authorizations. So I do encourage you to have a good relationship or good partnership, know how to contact those individuals so that you can get what you need. But do not start providing assessments or anything with our consumers without having that vocational rehabilitation authorization to do so. I can't stress that importance enough. And then once the assessment is done, and if you're looking to do the hire or the milestone 2, I will go on and say in many offices, they don't authorize that, but you should have a plan at that point, a plan for employment. And the reason we may not authorize that milestone 2 up front for the hire, because it might take you 2 days to assist the person in finding a job, or it might take 2 weeks, a month, and we just don't want to tie up those funds. But immediately when you get a person hired, that's why I said make sure you have a partnership or a relationship with the counselor so that you can get what you need immediately. So you can inform that counselor, hey, so-and-so it has been hired. I need that authorization to proceed with service. So, all right, so what I have on the screen, this is just going to be a quick overview. I think it's too big. I don't know. Let me see if I can maybe make that a little smaller. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to do like a brief overview of this because we have speakers later who are going to talk about this. We have Tim Green coming on to talk about assessments. Ashley Parsons will come on and she will talk with us about the vocational, about the milestone services. And so I'll just kind of do like a real quick overview of the services. We have assessments. We have the situational assessment. That is our milestone 1. The outcome for that, and hopefully you guys received this sheet. If you have not, please shoot me an email or you can write something in the chat to let me know that you need it. I hopefully emailed it out to everyone. But as far as the milestone 1, the fee for that is $1,200. The documentation required is over there in the last column. And again, Tim will go over that. The discovery, we have, someone's being admitted. Discovery, that piece is $1,700. And oftentimes that is, okay. If you're not muted, I'm going to ask you to mute your phone as you mute your computer as you're coming in. Thank you. So the discovery piece is $1,700. We have the person-centered profile. That piece is $500. And if you look, again, this information will be covered with you later. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the assessment services. Then we go into the hire. We don't get into the hire or the services until the individual has an individualized plan for employment and they have become a vocational rehabilitation consumer at that point. So we don't go looking for jobs at this point until the person has a plan. So you want to make sure that before you start seeking employment, the plan has been written, and hopefully you will have a copy of it. If not, I encourage you to ask for it, because you need to know what is the plan, what's the vocational goal, and if the consumer came to you in the applicant status and you help to do the assessment, that information should be used to help establish the goal. So we get into our services. I hire, that piece is $1,200, and over to the right is the required documentation for that. Job retention, / job stabilization / job coach. That's our milestone 3. That piece is $1,750 is our fee for service for that. And finally, we have a closure. The individual has worked successfully for 90 days, plus the time that it took you to get the person stable on the job. That outcome is $2,350. And you see over to the last column, the required documentation for that. In addition to those milestones, we have what we call the exceptional wage outcome. That is basically a closure. But this closure comes under certain criteria, must be met in order for you to get this outcome, and that is $500. And basically the requirements for the exceptional wage outcome is the individual must be a successful rehabilitation closure, and they must be employed working at least 25 hours a week and earning at least $9.25 an hour. And we implemented that as an incentive for providers to help our consumers to gain better, more wages so that they can have a better quality of life. We don't typically set it as a goal, but as a provider, you may want to set some internal goals for that. We celebrate every time we get one because we know that our consumer is earning what we call an exceptional wage. And that, again, our consumers are the most significantly disabled in the supported employment program. So we might say that $9.25 may not be a lot, but for many of our consumers, it is a lot. So we celebrate that. I will say this, as you go in and do your milestone services and your outcomes, be sure that you have your authorizations in hand. The VR counselors won't necessarily think to authorize for an exceptional wage outcome. However, if you know that your consumer has been hired, meeting the requirements for the exceptional wage, and you know that they're going to close in that, when you call the VR office and you say, hey, I need a milestone 4 because this individual is about to close, then if you know that the person meets that exceptional wage category, then you say, also give me an exceptional wage outcome authorization, and they'll add that to the milestone 4 authorization in order so that you can get your $500. But you have to ask for it. The counselor or the counselor's assistant probably will not be thinking necessarily about authorizing that. And then when you submit your paperwork at the end of the milestone, you make sure your paperwork reflects that this individual meets the outcome. If the person starts out as a hire, meeting the exceptional wage category, however, by the time they close the end of the 90 days, they may start losing hours. It goes under 25. So at the time of closure, if the person does not meet that exceptional wage category and it's not reflected on the milestone 4 paperwork, which would be the employment verification paperwork, you will not get the $500. You will not qualify for that. You will only qualify for a closure. So that's all I have as far as the milestone overview. And do we have any questions about that before I proceed?
There are no questions, but we do have a couple people that would like a copy. We Incorporated did not receive a copy of this, And also Ms. Jackie Johnson is asking for a copy of your PowerPoint.
Okay, all right. Thank you. All right, so since there are no questions about that, I'm going to make a note that I need to get this overview over to We Incorporated. And thank you for saying your name. So our next presenter will be Mr. Steve Green. And oh, wait a minute, hold on. I'm sorry. I've got one more thing I did want to share before I turn it over to you, Tim Green. I'm sorry. I think I said Steve Green. I don't know who that person is. We have Tim Green. So let me see if I can stop sharing for a moment. And I got something else I want to share with you. Y'all bear with me. We're in the age of training in technology. Okay, I'm going back to the PowerPoint. If it will allow me to. Okay, there we go. So I did go over those fees with you real quick, but some of you new providers may be wondering about, on average, about how much do you get. I went over the fees, but this PowerPoint here, it will tell you what to expect with an average case. Typically, a person will go through the milestone 1, the situational assessment. You would get the person hired, so there's an outcome fee for that. You will provide job coaching, and then we'll do the follow-up for the milestone 4, and then the individual will go on and be closed. So for a typical case, at the very least, going through all the milestones, for each consumer, you will be looking at about $6,500, and that is not including the exceptional wage outcome. And it's also not including a PCP if you happen to do a PCP. So it would be okay to, if the counselor prefers or wants to do a PCP in addition to that, but this is just our base rate for a typical milestone case. So you be looking at $6,500. And I'll get to the next slide. Okay, now this would be the amount for a typical case if an exceptional wage category has been met. So that's adding $500 to it. So you'll be looking at about $7,000 for a case such as this, going through all the milestones. Of course, like I said, I have not put the PCP in there. We don't always do PCPs with every case, but I do in some agencies that they do a PCP with each referral. So a typical case without the PCP, including the exceptional wage outcome, would be about $7,000 per case.